Hey friends, so we're starting a new theme this week and going off of springtime, the seasons. Last week we talked about plants and how they grow, and springtime is a really good time for them to start being planted, to start growing. But we also know that in spring we see lots of baby animals, right? So I thought that it'd be kind of fun to read some books that had baby animals in them. So a first one that is quite a classic, I think, and it takes place in Boston, which is even cooler, is Make Way for Ducklings by Robert McCloskey. So this is a really, really long book. So we're going to break it up into two parts, okay? So we'll start it today, and we'll finish it tomorrow, okay? So Make Way for Ducklings. And also it has lots of words. I'm going to read it and then show you. Make Way for Ducklings. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were looking for a place to live. But every time Mr. Mallard saw what looked like a nice place, Mrs. Mallard said it was no good. There were sure to be foxes in the woods or turtles in the water, and she was not going to raise a family where there might be foxes or turtles. So they flew on and on. When they got to Boston, they felt too tired to fly any farther. There was a nice pond in the public garden with a little island on it. The very place to spend the night, quacked Mr. Mallard. So they flapped down. Next morning, they fished for their breakfast in the mud at the bottom of the pond. But they didn't find much. Just as they were getting ready to start on their way, a strange, enormous bird came by. It was pushing a boat full of people, and there was a man sitting on its back. "Good morning," quacked Mr. Mallard, being polite. The big bird was too proud to answer. But the people on the boat threw peanuts into the water, so the Mallards followed them all around the pond and got another breakfast better than the first. They're saying good morning to this bird, but is this a real bird? Nope, they're on the swan boats. Maybe you've been on the swan boats. "I like this place," said Mrs. Mallard as they climbed out on the bank and waddled along. "Why don't we build a nest and raise our ducklings right in this pond? There are no foxes and no turtles, and the people feed us peanuts. What could be better?" "Good," said Mr. Mallard, delighted that at last Mrs. Mallard found a place that suited her. But "Look out!" squawked Mrs. Mallard all of a dither. "You'll get run over!" And when she got her breath back, added, "This is no place for babies. With all those horrid things rushing about, we'll have to look somewhere else." Poor Mr. Mallard almost got run over by the bike. So they flew over Beacon Hill and round the State House. But there was no place there. You need water, right? But in the city, there's not a lot of water to find. They looked in Louisburg Square, but there was no water to swim in. Then they flew over the Charles River. "This is better," quacked Mr. Mallard. "That island looks like a nice quiet place, and it's only a little way from the public garden." "Yes," said Mrs. Mallard, remembering the peanuts. "That looks like just the right place to hatch ducklings." There's the little island. So they chose a cozy spot among the bushes near the water and settled down to build their nest, and only just in time, for now they were beginning to molt. Do you remember that word from penguins? All their old wing feathers started to drop out, and they would not be able to fly again until the new ones grew in. course, they could swim, and one day they swam over to the park on the riverbank, and there they met a policeman called Michael. Michael fed them peanuts, and after that, the mallards called on Michael every day. They like peanuts, huh? After Mrs. Mallard laid 8 eggs in the nest, she couldn't wait to visit Michael anymore. She couldn't go visit Michael anymore because she had to sit on the eggs to keep them warm. She moved off the nest only to get a drink of water or to have her lunch or to count the eggs and make sure that they were all there. One day, the ducklings hatched out. First came Jack, then Cack, and then Lack, then Mack, and Knack, and Whack, and Pack, and Quack. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were bursting with pride. It was a great responsibility taking care of so many ducklings, and it kept them very busy. All those names are rhyming words, huh? One day, Mr. Mallard decided he'd like to take a trip to see what the rest of the river was like, farther on. So off he set. "I'll meet you in a week in the public garden," he quacked over his shoulder. "Take good care of the ducklings." "Don't you worry," said Mrs. Mallard. "I know all about bringing up children." And she did. She taught them how to swim and dive. She taught them how to walk in a line, to come when they were called, and to keep a safe distance from bikes and scooters and other things with wheels. When at last she felt perfectly satisfied with them, she said one morning, "Come along, children, follow me." Before you could wink an eyelash, Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack fell into line just as they had been taught. Mrs. Mallard led the way into the water, and they swam behind her to the opposite bank. I wonder where they're going. We're going to find out tomorrow. So that was our first part of of Make Way for Ducklings. I want you to think, where do you think they're going? Where do you think Mama Duck is taking all of her baby ducklings? Where do you think she's taking them? And how do you think she's going to get there? Do you think she'll swim? Do you think she'll fly? Can her babies fly? Do you think she'll try to walk? How do you think she's going to get where she's going? And I'll see you tomorrow for part 2 and the end of our book. Bye!